Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The pandemic has only amplified existing vulnerabilities of the homeless and those who are precariously housed. People continue to face skyrocketing rents, ballooning home prices, demo evictions, and have increasingly resorted to living in encampments. Vancouver East continues to have the largest encampment in the country as the cold, wet weather is upon us, and we're now grappling with the highest rate of COVID-19 in the city as well. The urgency for action is more acute than ever. The last time the importance of housing was backed up with serious action federally was after the Second World War, when hundreds of thousands of affordable and supportive housing units were built by the government to make sure returning soldiers from the war had a place to live. Now, veterans who served our country increasingly find themselves without a roof over their heads. Clearly, the Liberals do not feel the sense of urgency to act that housing providers and housing advocates do. While the Liberals have declared that adequate housing is a basic human right, their action do not come close to match their words. It took 6 months into the pandemic for the Liberals to announce the Rapid Housing Initiative, and their promise will only bring 3,000 new units to addressing the homelessness crisis. When over 235,000 Canadians experience homelessness every year, even before the pandemic made things worse, 3,000 units simply isn't going to cut it. The Canadian Housing and Rental and Renewal Association, the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, housing providers and advocates are all saying that this is not good enough. In fact, CHRA is calling for the federal government to increase the Rapid Housing Initiative funding by at least $5 billion. They also want to see the duration of the program to be extended to at least 2028. Communities also noted that the Rapid Housing Initiative announcement does not include any resources for wraparound social supports and services. For those suffering from chronic homelessness, supportive services are essential for their success. They're calling on the federal government to include additional resources to fund wraparound supports so that proper care can be provided to ensure their success. In Canada, 80% of the Indigenous peoples live in urban, rural, and northern communities, and they're severely overrepresented in the homeless communities. The fact that the announcement did not include a dedicated rapid housing stream for urban, rural, and northern Indigenous peoples highlights once again how their needs continue to be neglected by the Liberal government. Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness and CHRA know that when the National Housing Strategy was announced in 2017, there was nothing included for urban, rural, and northern Indigenous peoples, even though the Minister of Housing was explicitly told to create an urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing strategy in his 2019 mandate letter. A year later, there is still no strategy. The time to act is long overdue. The Indigenous caucus of the CHRA are demanding the federal government to develop a for Indigenous, by Indigenous national housing center. They want to see an increase in the supply of stable, safe, and affordable Indigenous housing by 73,000 units. They want accelerated action on Indigenous homelessness along with wraparound services to support Indigenous tenants' well-being and long-term success. And they want to see accelerated action on the elimination of Indigenous homelessness and a focus on northern housing. No more excuses, no more delays. The time to act is now.
Parliament Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleague from Vancouver East for giving me the opportunity to speak about the Rapid Housing Initiative, which the Prime Minister launched on October the 27th. This is an important new program that will quickly give more vulnerable Canadians a place to call home at a time when it is needed most. Some of those hit hardest by COVID-19 are those who also find themselves in a precarious housing. This includes seniors, women, and children fleeing violence and people experiencing homelessness. For example, it's impossible to safely shelter in place when you don't have a place to call home. Our government has recognized this and mobilized quickly to offer a number of supports to address these urgent housing needs. This includes additional funding of more than $236 million for reaching home. Canada's homeless strategy, these funds will help communities to extend and expand the emergency measures put in place at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as provide them with the flexibility to deliver housing solutions. Now, Mr. Speaker, many parts of the country are now in the second wave of the pandemic. As my colleague has noted, temperatures are dropping. It's clear that we need more affordable housing. We need it urgently, and our government is committed to helping make this happen. That's where our government's Rapid Housing Initiative comes in. This program represents $1 billion in federal investments. It will create 3,000 new permanent affordable housing units across the country. All units will be completed within 12 months from the signing of the funding agreement. It will focus on creating housing for Canadians in severe need, people who are experiencing homelessness or living in temporary shelters as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. At the same time, the program will stimulate the economy, creating good jobs when they're needed most. The Rapid Housing Initiative will be delivered through Canada's National Housing Strategy, a 10-year, $55 billion plus plan, but it will be delivered on a much more accelerated timeline. One half of the program's funds will be delivered directly to cities with the highest levels of housing needs needed in homelessness. The other half will fund projects led by provinces, territories, municipalities, Indigenous organizations, and nonprofit organizations. All projects funded through this initiative must be completed within 1 year. The funding can be used to build modular housing, buy land, or convert existing buildings to affordable housing. I've spoken to our partners in the cities, provinces, and territories in the housing sector. They advised us that the design of the program, and they are quickly mobilizing the seizing of this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, our government is proud to be working hand in hand with these dedicated partners to ensure that our most vulnerable people can be safely housed now and can thrive in the years to come. Mr. Speaker, I know it's the Parliamentary Secretary for Housing, who I would ultimately argue is one of the most ably-minded individuals in Canada when it comes to nonprofit housing. Proud to have him as a member of this caucus, who I know has on numerous occasions stated these type of words, in fact assisted me in this particular speech, to say to the member opposite that at the end of the day we have a caring, compassionate government that has really materialized like no other government before it in terms of investment in the future development of a truly national housing strategy. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I'll leave it at that and wait for the next question from the member.
Member for Vancouver East.
3,000 units of the Rapid Housing Initiative just doesn't cut it. The fall economic statement failed to indicate that action will be taken to ensure acquisition fund will be in place to support affordable housing providers in the purchase of distressed housing, while large for-profit capital funds have been buying up distressed housing. This was called for as early as March from the former UN Housing Rapporteur, Ms. Lalani Farah. She wrote to the government back on April 19th about this, and it's now December, and the government still hadn't even have the courtesy to respond to her. Her suggestion is further supported by many other housing advocates, including the Canadian Association to End Homelessness. The Globe and Mail wrote an article indicating that private buyers are lining up to try and get their hands on rental towers, especially the older buildings, which tend to have lower rents. If we wait to act, it will be too late. No more excuses. Time to act, Mr. Speaker.
Parliament Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, too many Canadians are in a housing need. The COVID-19 pandemic has made a difficult situation even worse, but our government is taking action and delivering strong results for Canadians. The Rapid Housing Initiative is the latest major program we've developed to help Canadians to get through these difficult times and would build back better. Now I ask my colleague and members on all sides of the House to do their part. I urge them to work with their local government and housing sector partners to help their constituents through this difficult time by making the most of this and other national housing strategy programs, Mr. Speaker. I would really encourage the member to do